What up, guys? So there's a new hero rebalance coming up soon, perhaps in 3 more days. So I'm looking at their Facebook page on today, which is a Monday, and yeah, seems pretty interesting. A lot of new things that they're going to change for Sraka, Deb, and Alfred. So let's have a look. Let's dive in together, and I'll share with you guys my thoughts about it. Alright, so Alfred's passive is a pretty strong passive, but it requires you to have quite a lot of enemies within its range. So for every enemy within his attack range, he will instantly get 7% attack per enemy. And obviously there are no changes for that. So Magic Burst pounds the ground with a fist full of magic to inflict damage equal to 127.2% of attack on nearby enemies. So I believe this is his first skill. So right now, after the buff, they are increasing the modifiers to 134% of attack on nearby enemies. So that's pretty significant, about 7% increase, which is quite a lot. So there's an additional status: if 2 or more enemies are hit, his attack increases by 8% for 1 turn. That's pretty solid, pretty strong. So you just need to get 2 enemies, and his first skill is not in a very massive AoE, but it's pretty easy to get 2 enemies within his range. It's not that hard, given that he's not immobilized or something. Alright, so the next, his second skill, Pyroeximus, uses a magic energy bomb to inflict 145.6% damage and temporarily charms enemies for 1 turn with a 28% chance. So after the buff, he will get a modifier of 156.3%. So that's a lot of increase. That's almost 11% increase, which is a lot. And temporarily charms enemies for 1 turn with a 40% chance as opposed to 28%. So another 12% increased chance there. Very useful in Tower of Dawn and perhaps in World Conquest, in certain maps where there are a lot of enemies which do not have any charm immunity. So you can apply that even though it's only for 1 turn, but it's an area skill. So if there are 3 or 4 enemies in the skill range, you'll have a very high chance to charm at least 1 or 2 enemies. Alright, the third skill creates Elemental Circle. It creates a magic sigil that inflicts 183.5% on nearby enemies and has 100% chance to decrease their movement by 4 for 2 turns. So Alfred's third skill is very similar to Lena's second skill, but it doesn't apply any mobilize effect. Instead, it applies decreased movement effect. So it's decreasing movement by 4 if you have something like a ghost stab. So it won't matter that much. But if your base movement is 5 and you're decreasing and you don't have any +1 movement sets, and your movement is decreased by 4, that's going to screw you up in your strats in Battle of Honor placing and such. Alright, so apparently they are buffing it to 193.2%. So that's almost 10% increase, and still has that 100% chance to decrease movement by 4 for 2 turns. So there is an additional parameter that they are adding. So 2 or more enemies are hit, the enemy's counter rate within the range is decreased by 8,500 for 2 turns. So that is pretty strong. You are decreasing enemies' counter rate. So you are decreasing their counter rate by 8,500. And I believe that's pretty high. So I believe Alfred can be used to counter heroes that utilizes outer space set a lot, or the new 1-star set, I forgot what is it called. Yeah, so decreasing counter rate by 8500, and it's for 2 turns as well. So there is one catch though. So if 2 or more enemies are hit, the enemy's counter rate within the range is decreased. Does that mean that if Alfred is next to an enemy within 1 tile and he uses this skill, so the enemy's counter rate within 1 tile is reduced, but if the enemy were to move away within 2 tiles, then the enemy's counter rate will be back to normal. You know, I'm not sure. It's quite confusing the way that they choose to word this out. But I'm sure we will get to test it out when the buffs come this Thursday. Right, but yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. So let's have a look at Sraka's buffs. Quite a lot of significant one. So let's check out his passive skill. So instantly restores 85% of MP with each kill and increases Sraka's attack by 24% for 2 turns. So we are still getting that 85% of MP recovery, and Sraka's attack increase by 24%. So this happens if you manage to kill someone or something. And apparently there's a decreased enemy skill damage by 30% for 2 or larger range skills. So instantly restores 85% of MP with each kill, increases Sraka's attack by 24% for 2 turns, and decreases enemy skill damage by 30% for 2 or larger range skills. So this means that excuse me guys. So this means that if you hit an enemy with this passive activated, it will decrease the enemy skill damage by 30% for range attack. Okay, for 2 or larger range skills. So that is quite significant. It's very similar to last week's Battle of Honor. If you grab that tile, it reduces like range attack by 30%. So yeah, so basically this wood is a counter to range heroes, you know, Bell, Lee, all those heroes which have, I believe it applies to Krat's 3rd skill as well. So it's very cool. Can't wait to see this into play soon enough. So let's have a look at his first skill, Pressure. Inflicts damage at 136.9% attack and stuns the enemy with 41.5% chance for 1 turn. Alright, so his first skill does have stun, still remember that. So now it's buffed to 143.7% attack, and the stun chance is still the same, so they are just increasing the modifier. Pretty solid. It's about 137, about 6 to 7% increase, I guess. Alright, so Maelstrom inflicts damage and 163.1% attack, decreases defense of enemies with HP lower than 50% by 2050 for 2 turns. So after the buff, he's getting 175.7% attack. So that's a significant buff, almost 12% buff in the modifiers, and decreases defense of enemies with HP higher than 50% by 2800. Alright, so if your HP is higher than 50%, then your defense is decreased by 2800, and it decreases defense of enemies with HP lower than 50% by 4400 for 2 turns. That's a lot. So this means that Sraka can always apply decreased defense debuffs on enemies, regardless of their HP being higher by 50% or lower by 50%. That would affect how much defense is decreased. But the chances of you to apply this debuff is 100%, it seems. So it's pretty good against bosses Maybe we might even see him in guild raids, you know, not too sure, but pretty solid. Definitely very solid skill. So third skill, Sraka becomes enraged and inflicts damage at 205.8% attack with a 7.5% chance of instant death. So Sraka, the modifier is still the same after the buff. The percentage of chance of instant death is still the same, but there's an additional ignores enemies defense by 5,800 when the skill is used after moving 3 or more tiles. So that's very cool. So you need to move him for at least 3 tiles to be able to ignore enemies defense by 5,800. I think that's one of the highest ignore defense that I've seen on a hero. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, 5,800 is a very high value. So I'm not too sure if, you know, for example, if you are controlling Sraka and the enemy is next to you, can you like move away 3 tiles and come back and the effect will be there? Or the requirements is that you're not allowed to do that, you know? So I'll be curious to see that, whether those are considered as moving away. You are moving away, but then you are moving back to the same spot. I'm not sure if that is counted as moving, or the requirements is that you have to actually move 3 tiles for it to activate this effect. So we will know that for in 3 more days. Obviously, seems very broken, all of his skills. So Deborah, let's have a look at her skill. So perfect aim, her passive, when eliminating an enemy, attack increases by 800 and movement by 2 for 1 turn. So after buff, they are increasing her attack by 30%. The movement is still there, so as opposed to 800 attack, so she's getting 30% attack and movement by 2 for 1 turn after eliminating an enemy. Seems pretty good. So detonates a magic fire column that inflicts damage equal to 135.9% of attack. So this is for her first skill, bomb. So after the buff, they are changing the modifiers to 155%. So that's almost 20% increase. And they are changing the skill range as well. Looks pretty good. Looks very solid. Alright, so second skill, Flame Burst Bomb. Inflicts 153.4% damage to enemies with flame magic and leaves scars, which in turn inflict an additional 55.5% damage over time for 2 turns. So they are buffing the modifier to 171.8%. So we are still having that 55% DOT for 2 turns. So if the enemy is already affected by a DOT, her final skill power increases by 10%. So seems pretty legit. So she can apply this skill to an enemy which is already affected by damage over time, and perhaps she can one-shot them or finish them off. So her third skill, Rain of Fire, rains down magic flames to inflict 196.1% damage and an additional 56% damage over time for 3 turns. So they are increasing the modifier to 209.7%, so that is an increase of almost 13%. So we are still having the 56% DOT for 3 turns, and if the enemy is already affected by a DOT, her final skill power increases by 15%. So similar to a second skill, she can be paired and comboed with another hero which has DOT like Scion or Raskria. So very solid hero. And yeah, I definitely can't wait for Sraka's Neo buff. I don't know, I think Sraka is probably the strongest. He's receiving the strongest buff compared to out of all these 3. Of course, I'm curious to know what you guys think as well, so yeah, feel free to let me know. I mean, Alfred is pretty good, but he seems to be in favor of utility and quite situational as well, because at the end of the day, he's good to have if you want to counter a counter hero. You know, you want to. He's an anti-counter to those counter heroes that utilize outer space, perhaps Bell, maybe Deimos as well. But yeah, feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below. So that's it for the video. I've already shared my thoughts. I hope to see you guys in the next video. Alright, that's it for now. Bye.